That was a perfect lead-in from Chris and Laura. And this panel is about politics, particularly how real estate has gotten left out of the political discussion in LA. So it's really just taps into exactly what they're talking about, but we're going to go a little bit deeper. Basically, it's the far left hand not talking to the moderate right hand. You have the DSA, who controls some of the council, and the real estate industry on the other. And this is happening in a lot of other big cities as well. This came to a head with the transfer tax. And, it's not just that. It's development, restrictions, it's rent freezes, all sorts of things that are affecting the business community. And the ULA passed with virtually no industry input. So today, we actually approached more than 20 politicians and advocates to be on stage with Lew to discuss this. And we had somebody lined up, they got cold feet. So we're going to discuss with Lew today. And in the future, I'd love to have a politics, industry debate. We're going to sketch out some things today. I just first want to introduce Lew. He is a statesman of LA real estate. He heads the LA, Orange County, and Inland Empire operations for CBRE, biggest brokerage in the world. He's past chairman of the LA County Economic Development Corporation, on the board of the LA Business Council. You do a search for him online, the first video that pops up is a night with Rick Caruso and Lew Horne, hour-long masterclass at USC. So that's the company that Lew keeps. So he's really a perfect person to talk about some of these issues today.
Well, you forgot about my biggest accomplishment.
Yes, and that was his daughter on the last panel, who I just found out about. So, obviously, building a mini Horne dynasty in real estate. That was the second generation. You're gonna have to wait a couple years probably for the third generation on stage, but it could be the real deal 2040. So the first question I want to ask Lew is, and Chris mentioned this on stage earlier, did the industry not do enough to fight ULA, and did it sneak up on the industry? What can be done from that, and what kind of outreach, more importantly, are you already starting to do now?
Thanks. I think Chris really summed it up. It's probably the dumbest thing we've ever seen. It was the most misleading initiative I have ever seen in my 40-year history in serving the commercial real estate business in Southern California. It was posed as a mansion tax, was focusing on homes that were in that $5 up to $10 million range, and that was all that was discussed in that ballot measure. And in fact, and then it was, and next to that, it was all about we're raising funds to try to solve our homeless community issue. The truth is that it's as Laura said and as Chris said, it's a tax on development, it's a tax on land, it's a tax on office, industrial, retail, multifamily. So it's a tax, if your building was worth $400 a foot, now it's worth $150, and you're losing it, it's a transfer tax. So we have a firm that we're working very closely with that this is an example of what the unanticipated consequences of that tax, and then I'll answer your question. But the unanticipated consequence of that tax had an impact on a development in the San Fernando Valley. 1,600 units that we were about to build, approved, ready to go. 350 affordable units is a part of that. 350 affordable units. That tax by itself elevated that. It pushed that after an 8-year entitlement process. Put close to I'm not going to say the number, but it essentially, with that tax, it destroyed that development project. So now, the anticipated desire of that tax was to build affordable housing, and it killed the deal. The deal's dead, and it's dead because if you're trying to get a 12%, return on cost, and all of a sudden you're paying 6 cents of that 12 cents to the city of Los Angeles, that's not a good outcome. It's an impossible outcome. The other issue that I think I want to mention before I forget is misleading and is inappropriate is that transfer tax is and was. There's another proposal right now with the County of Los Angeles to do the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. So the county right now is contemplating another transfer tax. We think it could be up to 6%. We don't know. It's being debated right now. It hasn't really been formalized, put to a vote. But again, I think the hopeful learning and the And the voice of our industry needs to become louder. Otherwise, if the county does a double dip on that transfer tax, it will completely stop all office, industrial, retail, and multifamily in the county as we know it.
And would that be then effectively a 12% tax in the city of LA?
We don't know exactly what the number is, but highly likely.
Wow. And that just goes to the broader point. Do you think our politicians completely tone deaf to the response that they've seen over ULA so far?
I think there is so much pressure right now to solve the affordable housing crisis in our community that gets thrown into the homeless crisis. And people want to talk about affordable housing. They want to talk about temporary supportive. They want to talk about shelter. And it's become the number one, for Mayor Bass and for Rick Caruso, it was the number one issue. It was the number one issue. So, and I've met with Mayor Bass to discuss, ways where we can play a role. And there is a laser focus on that and building initiatives to try to solve that issue. Now, the way we solve it, in my view, needs to be much more of a collaborative effort with public and private constituents. To the point where Chris said there really is no lobbying effort, and Jordan Kaplan's doing a great job, by the way. He's the CEO of Douglas Emmett. But I hired a new leader for our downtown LA office, Jessica Lull. She ran a political advocacy company called CCA in downtown Los Angeles. We have now met with all of the city council members. We're meeting with the county board of supervisors. We're organizing all of our data around the specific four corners of their respective territories, because we believe that we need to not just whine about the elected officials issue, but we need to start getting engaged early on in demonstrating to them what is powering their respective communities. So we have a civic involvement agenda now with all of our leaders and many of our large top brokers to meet with the county officials, to meet with the city officials, to make sure that they understand who are their biggest employers, who are the biggest investors, where are their developments happening. Because we need to get engaged. I also have a full-time lobbyist now in Sacramento. There was the attempt to repeal the 1031 tax a year ago, or 2 years. I think it was about a year ago. We put a lot of money into that. We defeated that. It's up again. It's up again. That measure's up again. You take away 1031, you put a ULA tax on, you put a tax on the county, you've just completely crushed the commercial industry.
So how have you gotten access to these politicians? Because it seems like in some cases, in the past, they've just been, just not receptive to even having a dialogue.
They're all
with real
receptive.
estate.
They're all receptive. In fact, the woman that I hired, Jessica Lull, who is leading this effort for us, worked for the last 3 mayors, has actually spent a lot of time with the city council. And when we say we're going and meeting with the city council or the county board of supervisors or the mayor, and we've met with all of them, we're also saying we're coming in with a gift, and the gift is research and information and data. And we're saying we want to be cooperative, we want to be involved, we want to play a role. Because what we don't want to do is have a situation like ULA, or what is being currently proposed with the county happen again. And it's our responsibility as an industry to inform them, to make sure that they're making decisions that consider all of the consequences of those actions. We've got it the only way. By the way, I find it so interesting that in 2017, H and HHH, there was $1.5 billion raised to build essentially 10,000 homes over a 10-year period. The increase in our unsheltered population last year was about that. Now, by the way, they're about halfway there. And by the way, the cost of those units is anywhere from $700,000 to $850,000 a unit. So I don't know what's affordable about that. But the issue is we've got to figure out a way to have public-private partnerships. There was 3 years ago, I dedicated our entire intern program, and we worked with the Gensler architectural company, and we came up with a database of all excess properties from federal, state, county, and city government. All excess. So these are sites that are next to flood control channels, underneath power lines, parts of freeway underpasses, but they're land that's available for temporary or permanent supportive or even potentially affordable. Ex-DWP sites, we've got 50,000 sites in a database that we can sort and dissect by county board of district, by city district, and we presented all of those to the city council individuals and also to the county. I also met with the mayor for 2.5 hours, describing what we could do relative to property that we already own, and to try to create temporary shelter to try to pull this problem off of the street. We've got to be engaged with the private sector who actually, the unintended consequence of the 1,600 units that just got destroyed can't happen again. We've got to figure out a way where we're not only working with our public officials, but the public officials are helping us clear swim lanes. CEQA reform.
Right.
It takes 3 to 5 years. In the case of that one, it took 8 years to get entitlements for these properties. Clear the bushes there. We're not going to do this 10,000 units at a time over a 10-year period. It's just an unrealistic goal.
Yeah.
We've got to drill down and empower everybody in this room who is in the development business. The speaker that was up here a few minutes ago talking about all of the multi-development that he's doing across the city. We got to make it easier for the private sector.
So you think it's a case of politicians in public, they're not going to get up on stage and glad hand with real estate necessarily, but behind the scenes they'll talk and discuss and take research that you're providing to them. And secondly, it's not necessarily, I'm curious in your mind, it's not that they're not well-meaning. They want to solve these issues, but they're just not educated in a lot of cases about, the law of unintended consequences. They don't understand the real estate implications of this.
Well, we haven't, to Chris and Laura's point earlier, we really haven't had we haven't had an avenue to get private, input. It looks good on paper. ULA looks great on paper. Tax the rich people, feed the poor. It looks great on paper.
Yeah.
But it loses it in the practical application. And so what I was so offended about by that bill was the way it was pitched. It was pitched to the public that it was taxing, the wealthy home buyer. And that wasn't the case at all. By the way, here's the numbers. March 31st, Laura, you sold the Union Bank building. Prior to that, ULI came into an impact on April 1st. The anticipated returns on that revenue by the city were supposed to be $500 million a month. No, excuse me, $500 million to $1 billion on an annualized basis. April, 3.6 million. The market just stopped. Not entirely because of ULA, the interest rate issue, the lack of capital on office. But the truth is, the office community has been cut in half. ULA now is essentially redlined the city of Los Angeles. I hope the county doesn't pass the next measure because it'll redline the county. But developers right now are quietly, they'll just go develop someplace else. They're not going to develop in a community where they're not welcome.
Yeah.
Or it becomes even harder, not only to get the entitlement, but actually to pay at least half of what they would have had as profit prior to that measure.
Can you take us through what happened during, ULA passing in the weeks or months before that? Was it a case of, the lobbying groups were
asleep.
This is not going to happen?
We were asleep at the switch. Nobody knew. We frankly didn't pay attention to it. Now, Jordan and his team did, and I'm not blaming this on the current administration. This was written prior to the election, and it was, part of the election. But what we need to do now is get it repealed. And I think what we need to do is, in moments and venues like this, have a dialogue so that people really understand that, forget taxing the wealthy. We're not now building homes. And here's what we need to build. Let's let the developers develop. And let's not focus on having developers just develop affordable housing. Let's just develop housing. To me, you could build a case that an affordable house or an affordable multi-unit is an older unit. Just build. The market will decide. But right now, you can't build affordable because the land's too expensive. The taxes are too high. The risks are too great. Just build. And by the way, what's luxury today will be affordable tomorrow.
And how do you think this could all get knit together? Chris talked a little bit about ULI, BOMA. You have, Jordan Kaplan. You've got a lobbyist for CBRE in Sacramento now. Like, is there some master organization that should take shape that has lobbying manpower? Because it's lobbying manpower.
Jordan's got a vested interest. He's got 20 million square feet in the county, so he's got a vested interest, and he's also, he's got a lot of courage, and he's a very strong leader. We're going to take the initiative because we're the biggest in the world, and I feel like it's our social obligation. It's our corporate obligation. And by the way, 5 years ago we started under my team, laser focusing on really the only hole in the boat that I saw in Los Angeles, which is the homeless issue. And this has been an issue that's been here for a long time, but we built the database, we gave it to the county, and we gave it to the city. We've now redeployed our management people, and we've got proposals now in front of multiple groups so that we can start facilities managing shelters, because we're not doing as much on the office space anymore, so we need to put these guys to work. We're also working with the city by selling the city and also helping the city identify hotel sites. Because a lot of these hotel sites, especially extended stays with kitchens, you can buy right, you can shelter people immediately, and we've had a very strong initiative working with the city to try to do this. So we've taken this on as our corporate social responsibility. And I think what I think large companies need to do is play a more active role, not only in just developing the awareness for our elected officials, but also for playing a role in helping. But what we've got to get away from is this two camps where we're all adversarial against the elected official. With Eric Garcetti, I went to several town meetings where we would identified sites, we all went together, and everybody wants to solve the homeless issue, but nobody wants to build anything in the line of sight of their current home. So there is a NIMBY issue, for sure. And so we'd have something set up, we have Gensler, they would design it, it would be something that could be sourced at a very deliverable price, it would be property that the city already owned, the neighborhood would come out and go crazy. And I looked at him and I said, you can't win. So I'm not blaming public officials. I think they've got a tough job. And by the way, they're all well-intended, they all want to do a great job, but they're all also voted in by the very population that they're going to be upsetting by building any kind of a shelter in any part of their community. So it's a tough issue. But we've just got to, as a community, recognize that we're up to 70,000 unsheltered human beings in the county of Los Angeles, growing it, depending on 10 to 20% on an annualized basis. It's one of the worst situations in the entire country. And I would argue that we treat stray animals better than we treat our homeless. And you drive down 4th Street, take a look. And by the way, I don't know how we actually measure mental illness, but if I see some poor elderly person in a wheelchair talking to a fire hydrant, they're mentally ill. Yeah. We've got to figure out some sort of the four corners of some sort of a metric where we can say we're going to help you. Because right now you got 4,000 people living in Skid Row. You know how many public bathrooms there are, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, in that area? It doesn't matter. You're all right. But by the way, even one of the initiatives from Mayor Garcetti was to put restrooms there, and they turned out they had to put an armed guard there because they were doing drug trades and prostitution in them. Yeah. So you've got a massive issue here that we've got to do collectively together as a private and a public community, working together, figuring out not only how to house, but then also, once we do build the capacity, we've got to figure out a way now to service these poor people. That comes from the county. The services come from the county. The land entitlement comes from the city. They got to work together because we can build all the capacity we want. If the county can't service these people and can't put caseworkers there, medical attention, mental health services, it's all for naught.
Right. But it sounds like, this really is potentially the beginning of a public-private partnership in which brokerage, can help select sites or do some sort of management conceivably?
Well, we're doing it.
Yeah.
I don't know that any of my counterparts are doing it, but we have looked, I did this several years ago because we had LA was the #1 destination for foreign investment in the world. Los Angeles eclipsed New York because it was a great per square foot trade amount, and you go to other communities and it was just too high. I just would go, and by the way, the Arts District was hot. My office is in downtown LA, so I would drive investors through 4th Street to get to the Arts District, and they'd all say the same thing. What is the plan? I mean, I'm driving through it looked like a different country. And I'd say there's no plan. Yeah. There's really no plan. And so I took it upon CB's responsibility to figure out a way to play a role in helping. And we're doing that. And I think there's a lot of other CEOs in this city that would step up and do that. But they're also not going to put good money after bad. Mm-hmm. They've got to believe that there's a real solution out there, and that our elected officials are going to follow through. I can tell you what they're not going to do. When you see a ULA tax or you see us overtaxed, and they don't believe that there's going to be a real solution in the long term, they're not going to invest.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really interesting. It seems like it's more sustainable, even if it's a brokerage initiative that is revenue generating in the sense of then maybe it's scalable. Then maybe you can do the public-private partnership in a way that is not just a charitable side project. You know what I mean?
I think, look, there's a lot of, we're talking to a lot of institutions right now, a lot of universities, a lot of state, and if you've got excess land, there are public-private partnerships where we can structure those deals where the equity is already there embedded, and we're not trying to figure out what kind of housing to build. We're just trying to figure out how to build housing. And what we need more than anything is help in Sacramento with CEQA reform. We need help in the city, at the city levels, at all city levels. Well, I mean, why? The ULA tax is, how about if we would have modified the ULA tax? Tax the profit from a developer at some level. How about we make residential exempt? How about we take the bankrupt office building in downtown LA and make that exempt? I mean, there's ways that tax could have actually made sense, but nobody got any input.
Yeah. And I mean, part of the reason is that, real estate's been vilified to some degree, and it's, politicians can't touch that third rail. And a story from last night, we had a dinner with Lew, a couple other people, 20 or 30 people. And so anyway, a PR person took a photo of one of the developers were there. PR person sent it to his mom. His mom texted back, "Oh, he's not evil. He doesn't look evil." That's what people. It's a developer. It's a villain incarnate. It was crazy that it even plays out that way. Right. So how can real estate change that perception?
When you look at the risk that Chris Rising takes when he invests in a project, or you look at the risks that go into an entitlement project that many of you are involved with, that can take anywhere from 2 to 4. Actually, I've never seen one take 2. They're going to take probably 5 to 8 years. You look at the amount of capital that you've got to put up front and invest, and the risk that you're going to take, you deserve a fair return. And so for the city to say, I want half of that return, and then the county to come in and say, I want my piece too, it's an unsustainable system. So we need a louder voice. We need to have a voice, period. Right now, our industry is relatively small. And so that's why we really haven't had any kind of a voice in Sacramento or at City Hall. But I think it's time that we all, and we're doing it. I mean, I'm holding my leaders and I'm holding my people responsible for making sure that we know the mayors, we know the city council members, we know the people that are investing in local communities, because real estate is it's a local business. If the city doesn't want you to build it, you're not going to build it. If the city runs the entitlement and decides what to build and what not to build. So we've got to figure out collectively as a group, how do we express what really needs to be done here so that we're not building 10,000 units in 10 years, but we're building 25,000 a year through the public-private opportunities that exist out there on existing land that's already controlled and owned in many cases by the federal, state, county, and city governments.
And one of the key things there is, there's the entrepreneurialism of real estate that helps grow the pie, right? I think for some public officials or people who just don't understand that. They don't have the entrepreneurial gene. They think there's just a fixed pie and you divide it up and that's what it is. It can never grow. Like not seeing that business grows things, right?
Right.
I mean, it's like, how do you teach that to public officials who don't, I feel like it's a cliche, but like, the public official who, had a business for two minutes and failed and never, doesn't understand the nuts and bolts of why we do what we do, the entrepreneurial nature of it,
Yeah. I mean, it starts with a dialogue. We've got to have a dialogue, and we're coming in, with gifts. We're coming in with information, with research, and with knowledge, and we're really inviting the opportunity to have a real conversation, so that we don't run into one of these ULA situations again. I mean, that to me is it's outrageous. It's got to be repealed. If it's not repealed, our housing, our homeless situation will get worse. Let me go back to the real driver that's impacting downtown Los Angeles. A lot of discussion on that last panel about downtown Los Angeles. We've created an environment where last month we invited Chief Parks and Chief Moore and Stacy Park. And we had 250 clients in the room, and they basically described what was really happening. We've got Mayor Bass coming in next month with Chief Moore, so that she can describe exactly what's happening, in the community. We've got to figure out how to displace the rumor and what's factually really happening. We're creating data points for all of my brokers, because what's really killing downtown LA right now is perceptions. It's perceptions. We've always had a homeless issue down there. There's always been a crime issue down there. But right now, what's really turning a lot of these buildings back to the bank is that their loans have come due. So the lender is looking at all of the CMBS. I mean, half the downtown skyline is either going to a special servicer or to a receiver, or back into the bank, or there's some sort of workout situation. 100% of those are because the loan is due. And right now the lender is saying, well, wait, there's no more demand because nobody wants to go back to the office. The interest rates have tripled or quadrupled in some cases. And we think there might be a recession. So office is off the table, and downtown particularly, because there's a perception of safety, homelessness is really off the table. So this perception there is a lack of demand right now. But I will tell you, I just leased a floor over at JP Morgan in Century City for a record rate. I'm supposed to be in this business. I'm supposed to be able to negotiate. Negotiate. We paid $850 a foot. There's a massive flight to quality right now. And here's the way the math works on people. Everybody's focused on lead. Lead's about $3 if you look at all the utility costs over the course of a year. Your rent is about $40 on average in LA. That one for me is going to be like $85. The people that make up the interior of your office building, anywhere from $800 to $1,000. So I could build a case where it really doesn't matter what I pay in rent. What I need is a place where people are excited to come to work. Design that is really exciting, technology that supports Zoom, and it makes a collaborative environment where my people can create culture. Because the people who are really getting screwed right now are the young people who are coming into the business. The people that don't have the opportunity for mentorship. There's no collaboration, there's no serendipity, there's no listening over the office, over the cube, to find out how deals are really cut. And it's the old Hamilton show. If you're not in the room when the deal's getting cut, you're really not in the room when the deal's getting cut. You're really not learning. You got to be in the room. Yeah. And so we're starting to create initiatives where in our meetings we don't allow Zoom. If you're going to be in the meeting, you got to be there. We're doing we tried the free lunches. I started buying a lot of lunches, and that wasn't really working. So now I got the meeting, but we're also no different than a Rick Caruso creating programming around the Grover Americano. We're creating programming within the office. We're saying to the office, we're going to have this speaker. We're going to have this kind of an environment together, and we're all going to learn from each other. You come here for 2 hours, you're going to be smarter walking out.
Yeah. You got to activate the space. Yeah. And I was in San Francisco, downtown San Francisco, earlier this week. I met with the Downtown San Francisco Partnership. And, you think of San Francisco as even worse, but they were kind of sketching out, and I don't know if I was just kind of spun by this, but, there is a path forward to the downtowns coming back, I think. It's not like a magic bullet where we're going to convert 80% of this to, residential. It's like, as they kind of described it, magic buckshot. It's, 10% of offices that are kind of, the oldest school offices getting demolished. It's 10% residential conversions. It's 3 days a week in the office with hot desks, which means 20% space reduction, not just no space usage at all. And that's kind of the path where you get back to something that looks like a real downtown again. So that, I don't know, to me that just seems like that's an actual doable thing rather than some of these pie in the sky kind of notions.
Well, I forgot the official that came out and talked about creating some sort of zoning so you could do the conversion from office to residential. Here's how that works. First of all, it can work. It's extremely expensive, but here's the way it works. You got to have the right dimensions of the building first. So if you don't have the right dimensions, it doesn't work. If the floor plates are too deep, no matter what the price, it could be free. It won't work. But if it's the right dimensions and I can get to a window line, I can build a balcony, I can open up for some sort of fresh air, I can actually make it work. But I got to buy that building at about less than $100 a foot. And we haven't. Laura, are we heading there? No. So, but probably one of the most active office to residential converters in the country right now is Jamie and David Lee. But they've bought over the last 25 years, and their basis in a lot of these buildings is less than $100 a foot. So they are doing successful conversions. But we are starting to see conversions. On B and C class office buildings that nobody wants right now, those are getting torn down to build industrial. On some garden office, if the dimensions are right and I can get to a window line and I can create the right MEP going up through the center core, some of those are getting converted. So that is a possibility. But the reality is most of the buildings like in a downtown high-rise, it's too expensive. The price points aren't there yet. And frankly, they don't have the right dimensions to make it work, even if it was free.
Yeah, it's just not a catch-all. My last question for you, Lew, and I'm going to double barrel it, is how is ULA going to get repealed in the courts or on the ballot? And then what can everybody here do to help facilitate this dialogue and this, taking back the city and business interests having a voice alongside, the political?
Well, I think, first of all, this is a great start, having sessions like this where we're really having a dialogue. We're a little late. But I will say this. I do think, for those of you that work for companies, the most important asset that we have are the people that walk in and out of the doors every day, up and down the elevators. I would ask the corporation that you work for, what are your corporate social responsibilities, right? I mean, I do think that as a company, we have a responsibility to play an active role in our community. And I really believe that. And we've got a big presence here, so we've got to play a role. I think we've got to be a lot more active by calling out whoever, I'm going to be careful here, but some of the people that you tried to get on the stage, the people that authored that ULA, it was misleading. And we've got to rebuild some level of trust. That was misleading, and that creates distrust. And that just can't happen again. I mean, that just can't happen. So we've got to elevate our level of awareness. We've got to make sure that these initiatives, these ballot measures, are actually studied, and we've got to, and frankly, as an industry, we need to do a much better job in the advocacy and the lobbying efforts to make sure that we really truly understand the total ramifications. And then we need to put together a real business plan. If I were king for a day, you'd start with the 70,000 people, right? I got 70,000 people. How much acreage is that going to take? Where am I going to place that? And by the way, I also need to put some enforcement here. I can't do this. In San Francisco, the tragedy in San Francisco is the state law that reduced the misdemeanor crime. So now all of a sudden we have smash and grab. There are some of these retailers that literally multiple times a day are being taken advantage of, and no business can sustain that. That if there is no law and order there, the number one reason that people won't move to some place is fear of health and safety of their employee. So right now, if the perception of downtown is that it's not safe, you're not going to get people to move downtown at any cost. You can do a $4, $3, $4 deal in downtown. It's $8.50 a foot in Century City. I can see it from my window.
Yeah.
But if there's a perception of safety, it's a non-starter. Because remember the math. If it's $40 for my real estate, but $1,000 for my people, the real estate doesn't, I'll pay more to be safe, to be in an environment that's walkable, to be in an environment where there's going to be better amenities, to have a design element and technology in the space which makes my people proud of where they work. And that coupled with, this is who we are as a company. We've got a heart. We're going to play a role in playing to the politician to make sure that their difficult job is made easier by what we can provide to them.
And I think next time around, people will be more aware if there's another ULA.
I hope so.
So I want to thank Lew for being on stage today. Thank you so much, Lew. And thank you, everybody, for coming out today. Really appreciate it.